Am I audible now?
Sir, he is audible for you?
It is audible. It's just a little low volume, but that's all right. We can proceed.
Okay. Your Lordship, the laws of Replimento are in pari-materia with the laws of Republic of India, and a writ petition has been filed in the Supreme Court of Replimento, asking for the recognition of rights of the people of LGBTQI+ community, rights like right to marriage, right to adoption, right to inheritance, that is civil rights. Shall I proceed directly with the issues, my lord?
Before you proceed, I just want to ask you what is the application that we're dealing with here? The nature of the application.
This is a writ of mandamus filed by the petitioners, my lord.
Very well. Can you quote the exact provision of law?
Article 32 in the Constitution.
Can you correct yourselves?
Sorry, sir?
This is not an Article 32 application that we are dealing with. We are actually looking at an Article 139. These have been transferred from the respective high courts, is it not?
Yes.
Yeah, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
I stand corrected.
Yeah.
4 issues were framed by the Supreme Court of India. I would like to deal with issue 1, with your permission.
Please go ahead.
My lord, the first issue that was framed by the Supreme Court of Replimento was whether or not the Hindu Marriage Act and the Special Marriage Act can be read in a manner to include the members of the LGBTQ+ community. The council, that is me, I will base my argument around the intent of legislature. This is a question of interpretation of statute, and when the words of the statute are plain and unambiguous, the literary rule of interpretation works into play. I will be basing my argument around this. Shall I begin, my lord?
Yeah, please proceed, and please refer to the exact provision which you're talking about, which is unambiguous. Yeah.
Yes. My lord, Section 5 of the Hindu Marriage Act and Section 4 of the Special Marriage Act talks about, among many other things, any 2 Hindus and any 2 persons. And then it talks about so many conditions. That is, any 2 Hindus who are, who do not already have a spouse, who are not insane, can marry, and a detailed procedure has been given how they will marry. Both these statutes deal with it. So the problem before the court today is whether the words any 2 Hindus can be interpreted in a manner to imbibe or to take in within it the members of the homosexual community. Because prima facie at first reading, any 2 Hindus could definitely mean, if any 2 Hindus can marry, any 2 Hindus would definitely mean a man and a man also can marry. So I will be basing my argument on the literary rule of interpretation. A very striking feature of this whole act is the statutes do not expressly say that any 2 Hindus of opposite gender or any 2 persons of opposite gender, right? Had this been the case, then this petition would turn futile. My contention is this: the parliament in its own wisdom did not add these words, any 2 Hindus of opposite gender, any 2 persons of opposite gender. Therefore, in Philip John versus Commissioner of Income Tax, the Supreme Court had already propounded that as per the literary rule of construction, the literary rule of interpretation of statutes, intention of the legislature must be gathered from the words of the statute itself. Now, if the words are unambiguous or plain, they will indicate the intention with which the statute was passed and the object to be obtained by it. I will repeat myself. If the words of the statute are unambiguous, which is here in this case, any 2 Hindus, no ambiguity lies here, they are very plain, then the intent of the legislature shall be gathered from the statute itself. And we all know that the intent of the legislature is of paramount importance when we interpret some statute. So,
may I just stop you there for a second?
Yes, sir.
I do agree with your argument insofar as the principles of literal interpretation or literal understanding of a statute without any ambiguity. The only question that I intend to pose to you is that where is the genesis of this Hindu Marriage Act? Where does this lie from? We are not talking about a uniform civil code, are we? We are from a religious background, and the act itself contains in itself the name Hindu, which connotes a religion aspect. In this religion, whatever principles and cultures and traditions that have been forthwith passed on from generations together would form. Now, can you please substantiate your answer there as to the historical evidence for that matter when you say that the constitution, the lawmakers in their wisdom, when you say the lawmakers in their wisdom, I am actually attributing the wisdom towards the religious aspects to it as well. Can you please address that question?
Yes, sir. I'll take a little time. I got your question. Actually, Your Lordship, the Republic of Replemento is a very complex country. It has people. It's a very big country. It has around 1.3.5 billion people, and people of many religions remain here. And 3 articles of the Constitution of Republic of Replemento, notably Article 25, 1 second, my lord. Article 25(1), Article 26(b), they both talk about freedom of religion, and 13(2) says that no statute shall be made which shall go against it. Now, the personal laws are of supreme importance, and they are what govern the civil affairs of this country. And the personal laws, that is the personal laws of Hindus, are derived from ancient texts. When we talk about Muslims, they are derived from the Shariat law, and Christians have now the Christians have their own codified biblical law, the Christian Marriage Act. So we are talking about the LGBTQ people, of inclusive of all the genders. Those who can be encompassed into the Hindu Marriage Act shall be given a chance in the Hindu Marriage Act, and the others will be given a chance in the Special Marriage Act. Have I satisfied your doubt, my lord?
I'm still looking for an answer to find a historical evidence insofar as I'm not going to come into the aspect of the Special Marriage Act. Just try to answer the question in terms of the Hindu and the religion aspect. And where do you find this in the contextual, mythological, or rather what you call the religious people as their own, holy, text? Do you find any evidence of that as well? Because I cannot see, I'm not here sitting, I'm not a lawmaker, right? I don't have power to amend. This court will not be amending or supplanting any law. I'm only here to understand, interpret, and also give a plain understanding. So please go ahead and answer this question. Yeah.
Okay. I think what my lordship wanted to ask is, since the Hindu Marriage Act 1955 is nothing but just an amalgamation of just, I think sir has left the meeting. Okay. The Hindu Marriage Act is nothing but a consolidation of the ancient texts like Mitakshar, Daya Bhag, Yagyavalkya Smriti, and also, am I correct to say that my lordship wants to ask that the recognition of sexual people's marriage is either coming from there? Does it exist over there? Is that what you're asking?
No, this court has already given in favor of Article 377 being decriminalized. Okay, what happens in the private 4 corners of a room, the sexual encounters of 2 individuals with consent, has nothing to do with this particular petition. Please do not confuse your application with this. This court, suo moto, has taken up all of these petitions on one ground with the common plea, or rather I would say with the common relief that is being sought in respect of giving civil rights to the LGBTQI. In our humble view, this court feels that all civil rights are very much available irrespective of one's sex, one's creed, religion. So what is it that you're exactly asking this court?
Okay, I got it. The members of the LGBTQ community, however, they are deprived of the fundamental right to marriage. And we have come here, we have knocked the doors of the Supreme Court that, as you said, my lord, that the intrinsic fundamental rights are available to everybody irrespective of their gender or, let's say, sexual orientation. So the thing is, in the current personal law of Hindus, they, a homosexual couple may have coitus with consent and other things above 18 plus inside a room, may live in a relationship. It is not illegal, but however, they cannot solemnize a marriage. They do not have the right to adoption yet as a couple. Individually, they do have as a couple. And the right to inheritance and the other things that are governed by the personal law of Hindus, which is derived from Mitakshar and Daya Bhag, now governed by statutes like Hindu Adoption Act, they are denied of this. And we have knocked the doors of the Supreme Court to allow them what is rightfully theirs.
No, I can only enforce the law. As I said, I'm repeating myself, I cannot amend or supplant or even legislate,
Yes.
right? I'm incompetent under
Yes.
the pillars of the Constitution.
Of course.
Therefore, you should actually go for a different forum or an approach as such, right? We are guaranteeing that the fundamental rights of each citizen is protected irrespective of their sexual orientation. And insofar as the question of marriage is concerned,
Yes.
please enlighten this court as to what stops you from enjoying a personal family life.
A personal family life. You are right, my lord, that I address this in two parts. Yes, the court cannot do what the legislature is supposed to do. I agree. But most certainly the court can interpret it. We are here strongly contending that what has to be naturally interpreted is somehow not being interpreted already in the society. We are just here. We want a validation from the Supreme Court. If there will be a sanction given by the Supreme Court in its judgment that any two Hindus comprises of homosexual couples, they will already get it. We are not here. We are not requesting you to add some words in the statute, or am I clear? I'm just asking you to widely interpret. The councils are just requesting the Supreme Court to interpret the words any two Hindus in a wider scope, in a more generous way, and inculcate in it the members of the LGBTQ community. This is in any way, we are not asking you to legislate.
All right, then let's get into the aspects of what exact rights are being infringed of the LGBTQI community. Can you just enlist them?
Yes, yes. The right to marriage. The right to marriage, may I enlighten the court? The right to marriage, if I'm talking about the Hindu couples, it is widely accepted that it finishes off with a saptapadi. Okay. And as per the place of residence and domicile, whatever school of law the people fall in, the whatever customs they have. Like we have this concept of Mangal Sutra in northern parts of India. In the southern part of India, they do not have it. So this is how it goes. But in practicality, but if we see in the real world out there, a homosexual couple is unable to find a pandit who will solemnize their marriage. The words a husband and wife, the words husband and wife, as I've been in the section 17 of the Hindu Marriage Act, is being interpreted in a manner that it shall consist isolated a husband and a wife. We are saying that a husband and wife can be a husband and a husband, and a husband and a wife and a wife. So a husband and a husband and a wife, they are, it is just not happening. It's the court in.
So I cannot teach a priest what mantra he has to spell out. I cannot teach a temple what needs to be taken as marriage or a holy union for the purpose of procreation.
So, my lord.
I wouldn't be able to do that. I wouldn't be able to do that. Well, I cannot change the practice from millennia. And so may I give an idea to the council? Rather, why don't you, by not disturbing, the Hindu law, rather, why not you seek for a special enactment? Right? Why not just like a Parsi female marrying a Christian man? They do not fall under a respective personal religious laws, but rather they go under a special marriage act. Likewise, why can't you just stick to that particular law and not disturb the sanctity or the harmony that exists in the society?
May I? The Supreme Court itself, if the Supreme Court remembers its Sabrimala judgment, the Supreme Court did actually change the local custom. Nobody was stopping women from entering, but the custom was so that women did not use to enter, and two women, however, they were not from the same religion, but they pleaded this court that they shall be allowed what should be actually happening. Although because of some customs, it was not happening. So the court just wrote it in its order. And when something gets written, Article 141 says that the law declared by the Supreme Court shall be binding on all, on the entire country. So when it has a judicial sanction, it is easy to approach a superintendent of the police and get it covered.
No, this court does not consider the Sabrimala judgment, or rather, I would be preemptively stating the triple talaq judgment as a precedent for this matter. So please make your submissions independently and stick to the aspect of whether marriage is what you want, or the other civil rights of communion, such as being able to adopt our rights, fundamental rights that are guaranteed under Part 3 are protected. And in any case, nothing can take away, and this court will ensure that no body shall breach those rights because you are a citizen of this country. Irrespective of that, what exactly can this court? I cannot legislate. So enlighten me as to, before you take the precedence of these two matters, because they are also touching upon the customary aspects of a particular religion, of both religions, in fact, Muslim law as well as the Hindu law. Without touching upon those things, can you identify the practices? Because I'm sure the jurisprudence of law covers that any law emanates out of a tradition or a long practice. So the tradition is now, you have to, beyond any reasonable doubt, establish that there has been a practice or a tradition that these union of the same sex is possible and is allowed. We are not going to teach the Hindu religion practitioners that they have been practicing since millennia. We cannot do that. We are a court trying to understand what rights have been infringed of the petitioners.
Your Lordship has framed 3-4 questions. Actually, I was going to deal with 3 of them after the 4 you have asked in my written submissions, which I was going to speak. But okay, somehow I will jump it and tell you in summary how it is going to. I will deal with them later. I would request the court master, with the permission of the court, to expand our time a bit, if it pleases the court.
We will extend your time by another 3 minutes, right? That's the time probably I've taken asking you a question. Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. Earlier you had asked, I was not able to finish. Why?
Sorry to interfere, but when sir was asking the question, I was stopping the time.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Much obliged. My lord had asked me earlier that why did I not go to the legislatures of this country, because correctly it's a matter of, we understand. My lord, the answer to this is expeditiousness. I think that's self-sufficient. It's very, very tough. It's very, very tough to convince 272 MPs to agree to this thing when so I think this part is self-explanatory. Therefore, we believe that it is more expeditious if the Supreme Court just widely interprets one word, that 2 words, any to Hindus. I understand that is also an alternate remedy. We understand, but this is more expeditious. Now, coming back to the fact, you asked that, is there any precedent or is there any legal backing from the ancient Hindu laws? Because the codified law comes from the, yes, my lord. There is backing. I would like to extend that argument. See, we all agree that customs, as per Hindu laws, customs have the force of law. And I'm forgetting that particular maxim, which says that one custom outweighs 100 texts of law. There was a maxim, I'm forgetting it. One custom outweighs 100 laws. Now, I would like to ask, how does a custom begin? We have in India customs where men are married to dogs for their Mangal Dosh. Aishwarya Rai Bachchan, popular female star of Republic of Replimento, she was married to a Bargat banyan tree. She was married to a banyan tree. So this is a custom. However weird it may sound, it is a custom and it is well accepted. I am propounding to ask, in the northeastern regions of the Republic of Replimento, there are societies which are matrilineal. They, however anomalous they may sound to the otherwise conventional practices followed in the rest of the Republic of Replimento, if a custom exists, so shall it exist. I am asking is, cannot there be a new custom? How does a custom form? Somebody starts it, then it perpetuates through decades. It is the beauty of the Hindu law that it allows the members of its community, the believers, to start a custom, and however anomalous may it sound, however, even if it talks about marrying a dog, if it gets accepted, and it perpetuates through decades, it shall have the force of law. The councils on the behalf of petitioners are begging this court to not to order a gag order and prohibit this. Let this be done, and soon shall it become a custom. My lord,
we are not prohibiting anything. There is no interim
the
application.
society is, my lord, prohibited.
It's going to be a status quo. Okay, it's going to be a status quo if this court does not rule on this. Okay, so they know there will be. Please proceed. Yeah.
Also, you said, are there? Yes, my lord. See, the Daya Bhag and the Mitakshara. Daya Bhag.
Continue. I'll call it.
The Daya Bhag and the Mitakshara, they are fundamentally very different from each other. They oppose each other in the terms of who will inherit, whether the son will inherit or not. If we go by Dattak Mimamsa, or if we go by Vivad Tandav, or if we go by Yagyavalkya Smriti, they are all different. And they were made, another one popped after 500 years. It was not like all of this existed in one time. Actually, Manusmriti existed, and then came Yagyavalkya Smriti, and then came a dozen other Smritis, which were different, right? So we are saying that the Hindu society, the Vedic society, had always welcomed new jurisprudence, which historically had been conflicting with the existing one, even conflicting with the Manusmriti. And the Hindu society was adoptive. That is, I think it needs no more proof. So the call of the hour is that the Republic of Replemento and the Hindu society now accepts this homosexual jurisprudence. I would like, please pardon me, not homosexual jurisprudence, but the inclusive jurisprudence of all the trans, bi, and inter people. Therefore, we have come here. So, have I satisfied, my lord?
Very well. This court is going to go ahead with the second speaker, and then we'll let you know whether we are satisfied. If you're done with your issues, we can move on to the second speaker.
As the court said, I have
sure.
things to say, but
sure.
Okay.
Greetings, Your Honor.
Yeah, please go ahead.
If it may please the court, counsel seeks permission to resume the arguments for issue number 3 and 4. Issue number 3 asks whether or not the customs, traditions, rites, rituals form an exhaustive code as contested by Republic of Replemento. Your Lordship, the words exhaustive code mean a complete list, a complete set. That is, no addition to the existing list is possible. Hence, the issue before us is whether something can be added to the personal laws or not. The sources of Hindu law are ancient texts, that is, Shrutis and Smritis, customs, traditions, rites, and rituals. Had it been exhaustive, modern additions to marriages of Hindus, like the divorce, intercommunity marriage, intercaste marriage, widow remarriage, adoption by single unmarried mothers, etc., which are completely alien to ancient law, would not have been possible. In fact, Article 25, Clause 2, Subclause B states that nothing in this article shall affect the operation of any existing law or prevent the state from making any law providing social welfare and reform. Stress here is on the point that state cannot modify and reshape personal law if such alteration is for social. State can modify and reshape personal law if such alteration is for social welfare and reform of the society. Statutes like the Caste Disabilities Removal Act, the Hindu Widow Remarriage Act 1856, the Hindu Women's Rights to Property Act 1937, the Child Marriage Restraint Act 1929. These are some examples of legislations breaking the religious norms which are in derogation to human rights and enacting progressive acts. It will not be the first when Parliament will reshape the marriage laws. Gandharva Viva, Asura Viva, Pisach Viva were accepted form of marriage as per ancient law. but are not recognized form of marriage anymore today. New addition like intercaste marriage has been allowed, which was earlier not permitted. Had it been exhaustive, how were these made possible? Kshetraj, Gunaj, Kanin, Shatrohaj, Krit, Kritim, Swayamdat Putra were recognized ancient law, whereas today only Oras and Datak Putra, that is biological and adoptive child, is recognized by the law. It is more than clear that legislature has from time to time added and erased the personal laws for the betterment of the society.
Counsel, if I may just pause you there. Can
Yes,
you just enlighten this court as to when in the Republic of India was a an intercaste marriage was prohibited under which law? Or was there an express law made to ensure that intercaste marriage is legalized? Was there a debate in the constitution regarding this? There is absolutely no such prohibition ever. So these are not valid examples in my opinion. So can you please, if I just give you an example, the untouchability, if you can understand, in Hinduism, especially the Hindu religion, was considered to be prevalent to the extent of actually the lawmakers making a law in that aspect, right? So if I'm not wrong, in 1955, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there was a protection of civil rights was done. Yes, and a statute was passed, and that this particular law ensures that the civil rights are granted to every person irrespective. This is only a reiteration of Part 3 of the Constitution of India, nothing more, nothing less. So it is well within the parlances of Part 3 and Part 4, in fact, right? And also the directive principles of the state policy. Now, our question is, what prohibits the guaranteeing of Part 3 rights to persons of same sex or the LGBTQIA plus? Is there as such, because this court has already dealt with this issue insofar as the sexual intercourse, the definition of unnatural offenses has been modified to that extent, and ensuring that there is peace and harmony among LGBTQIA community. Now, when you're saying about the marriage aspect, you're concentrating on Hindu laws. You're not even enlightening this court as to what are the because we are not living in a uniform civil code, please address the court also on respect of the Mohammedan law and the other laws, or other personal laws as well.
So first, I would like to address your issue one, that is, you said that nowhere intercaste marriage was prohibited. Sir, in ancient text, it was prohibited, and that's why the caste.
We are not upholding the ancient text. We are talking about the laws that have been promulgated in this country as a republic. So, irrespective of the fact what has been written in the ancient text, it will only go against your argument or your friend Mr. Vedang's argument that it has to be transitional, it has to be progressive. What has been written, I'm asking for a religious or a historical background which supports this claim that same-sex marriage can be allowed. There is no statute as on date that has been enlightened. That is true. But now we need to understand as to the backing, because it is being affected to one religion. The entire arguments are being carried out only against one particular religion, which is completely objectionable to this court, because we are dealing with individuals irrespective of religious background, right? I hope you understood the question. It's a two-part question. I'm saying, one, there has never been a prohibition at all. Two, when the religious texts do not permit so, irrespective of whether it is Hindu, Mohammedan, Parsi, Christianity, why is it that it is so important that it needs to be actually through this court, through this forum, that an amendment should be done? And absolutely, I don't have the legislative competence to do so. So please answer these two-part questions.
Sir, first of all, like, there is absolutely no law. I agree with your point, but today there is a need to make a law. I know you like court does not have that power also to make the law, but it can give guidelines to the legislature to draw legislate on this matter. Reason behind it is a violation of their right as well, the LGBTQIA plus community, and we stand in it's 21st century. Like, we are living in a we are growing, so time has come and society needs to evolve according to the time. According to that, only they should get the right. Depriving someone just because there was no mention in the Quran or Bible or Hindu law of their rights, just because there is no mention, it would be completely a gross violation of their rights. If we see, Hindu text also violated the rights of the Shudra community for a long period of time. But today we have made law. Why? Reason behind, we saw at that period of time that how their rights were violated. Like that was a gross violation of human right. Every time when there was a violation of human right or any violation of rights, legislature has come and legislated the laws. So why not this time? Let's start a new culture. That is my only point, that court should issue guidelines to the legislature to legislate new laws so that LGBTQI plus community should also get the opportunity. I completely agree that there is no mention in Quran or Hindu law or Bible about this homosexuality should be allowed. But we need to consider this point, that are they not humans? Like, should we deprive them only on the basis that in an ancient text it was not mentioned, or we should evolve according to the society? There are many countries outside which has given the status, and it's time for Republic of Replimento also to evolve, because it stands in an international organization.
We are all for the progressive nature that you're speaking about, the council. We are all for the ensuring the rights are protected. And that's the reason the Republic of Replimento holds a very good, respectable position in the international organization as well. When you speak about prisoners' rights or prisoners of war, upholding their rights as well, these courts have been very proactive. Now we are dealing with a subject which is absolutely, completely imbibed, very deep-rooted into religious aspects. Now, this is a secular country. Now, any change of law that you're seeking from this court, even in the form of a guideline, cannot be done. It will only be reprimanded by the public. Now, whether there is a majority or not, it's absolutely up to the parliament to legislate on a past aspect. Now, if you want us to pass any remark, it will be my personal opinion as a judge, as my personal opinion, but I cannot direct the legislature to legislate upon an aspect. I can only pass guidelines, as you rightly put it. Now, what good would it do for you if I just give out a guideline and the valuable order of this court would remain a paper trail? Is that what you really request from this court?
Yeah, Your Honor, my co-counsel would like to answer the point.
Yeah, please go ahead. No problem. Please go ahead.
Much obliged, my lord. Yes, as your lordship said that the court is not intended to ask for implementation of a legislature. I would like to remind the court of the Vishakha judgment. This Supreme Court itself, shall I continue or is there?
Please go ahead. Please go ahead. I'm listening.
The Vishakha judgment, there did not exist harassment of sexual workplace.
Prevention of sexual harassment at workplace.
Yes. In the Vishakha judgment, the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court is not asking what to legislate. What will be the contents of that statute is not what the Supreme Court is telling. The Supreme Court is telling the subject matter on which it has to be. So this is not interfering into the matters. This is not this is not ultra virus for the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is not interfering in the dominion of legislature. Also, you said that why shall the Supreme Court interfere with the religious laws? My lord, I may ask, you said that the society will reprimand it. The society will outright reject it, and that consensus should be built first. Okay.
No, the court only says there could be a possibility of writing, and this has been established in Sabrimala case, Triple Talaq case.
Yes. Did the court retract Sabrimala judgment? I couldn't hear you, my lord.
What was the question posed by you?
I said that we all saw the outer, the Malayalis did not accept it, that the Supreme Court retracts its judgment.
This was not the bench which passed the judgment. If there is anything, a review petition may be filed.
That judgment was not a coordinate bench. It was a constitutional bench, and this is a single judge bench.
Let us not go into the technicalities because it's a single bench and Supreme Court does never have a single bench.
Even if it is a division bench, that was a constitutional bench order, and ordinarily 5 judges bench.
Very well.
I'll be stubborn with this.
No, I was not part of the constitutional bench. I would probably be very much opposing the view of the majority. Who knows? I'm not saying I would, and I am, but I would have.
Your Lord, the words like may, would are not good. The fact is, this is a division bench.
This court is dealing with this, as already stated. This court is dealing with this case on its own individual meritorial basis.
Of course.
And any precedents that may be applied upon in the passing of any judgment by this court shall have a bearing and will be finding a mention in the judgment. But the council cannot, in your best wisdom, direct the court to ensure that this is being taken into consideration. All right. Yeah, please.
This is the job of Your Lordship, us attorneys, to earnestly request the court. We are just requesting the court. We are not ordering the court. How can we do that? We cannot challenge the majesty of the court. We are setting.
Advocate yourself. Advocate the cause, and that would suffice the purpose. Right? We are not sitting here on an appeal. We are not sitting here in a review. You should understand the scope of the writ petition as well that has been filed before another court, to ensure that there are no conflicting judgments passed by different jurisdictions in the state and to ensure harmony. All these petitions have been suo motu transferred here under Article 239A. Whether there is a cause to interfere into the business of each of the High Court is something that needs to be understood and reviewed by this, decided by this Honorable Court. And that's all what we are doing. And to understand whether there is a breach of any Part 3, because I sure know that this council would understand the scope of a writ petition under 226, or rather Article 32, Part 3 has to be shown, established beyond reasonable doubt to have been infringed. So were you succeeding is my question to you.
Yes, my lord.
Yeah, please show us. Please show us.
Fine. I'll go right over there.
Yes.
I will first prove that the right to marriage is a fundamental right. This is what the court is asking now, that is there a breach of fundamental right? I will first prove that the right to marriage is a fundamental right under the ambit of Article 21 of the Constitution. And then I will prove that it is extended to obviously to the members of the LGBTQ plus community. For this, I would use 3 precedents very commonly. The Lata Singh versus state of Uttar Pradesh, which said that a major is entitled to marry to whoever she wants. Another would be a suo motu writ petition taken by the Supreme Court, which said that the exact word that I earlier said, an inherent aspect of the Article 21 of the Constitution would be freedom of choice of marriage. 2 precedents saying that it is a fundamental right under Article 31. Third will be Shakti Vahini versus Union of India. It was a writ petition. This said that choosing life partners is automatically coming under Article 19 and 21, and such a right has the sanction of constitutional law. Once that is recognized, the said right needs to be protected. And
what these courts, we understand this court is well aware of all these precedents and appreciates the council to have actually laid their hands upon such valuable judgments. But only question is, were those judgments rendered in the circumstances that prevail in the present case? Was the judge in those particular judgments dealing with partnering with the same sex? Now again, the moot question comes back to that you have to substantiate where the Article 21 is being infringed, and more so the choice of marriage that you speak of. Again, if you understand, has to go hand in hand with the right to follow one's religion. If this court unilaterally passes any judgment that 2 people, irrespective of their sex, go and marry under the Hindu rites, the majority, I would rather put it this way, just to be a devil's advocate here, that the majority Hindu population would rather riot against this particular judgment, stating that it hurts their sentiments. How would you uphold the sanctity and the harmony of this country? Without harmony, there can not exist any value, because it remains a paper mockery, any judgment that is passed by this court. So please establish that there is absolute violation of fundamental right.
Okay, I can. The council will most certainly prove it.
Yes.
First, the court was saying that did those following above mentioned judgment take place in the same circumstances or nearly same? No, they were not talking about homosexual marriages. They were basically talking about inter-community, inter-caste marriages. But may I, just for my clarification, ask the court that is the court implying, is the Honorable Supreme Court today implying that when it had herself, the Supreme Court herself had said that a major is entitled to marry whoever she wants, it actually said this will apply only to heterosexual?
Absolutely, absolutely. We were referring to the law that was made available to the Supreme Court. And the law is what you have read, Hindu Marriage Act and the Special Marriage Act, which you now intend for a clarification from this Honorable Court. Without any seeking of clarification, it is naturally understood that it is about two different opposite sexes.
I have one last precedent which I was not able to quote, and thankfully it has come to my rescue. That is the most famous case, Navtej Singh Johar versus Union of India. Justice Chandrachud had categorically said that LGBTQ community people are entitled. I would ask the court, I would request the court to take note of the words used here very correctly. The members of the LGBTQ community are entitled, just as all other citizens, full range of constitutional rights, including the liberty protected by the Constitution and it was talking about, okay. So this answers your question that, have I satisfied, my lord?
Can you please enlist what are the constitutional rights provided under the Constitution?
The constitutional right provided here Justice Chandrachud was talking among all the other rights, Article 21, that is right to life. When widely interpreted, that right to life is, if I say to somebody that you're a free citizen, you can move in the country, but I will not allow you to marry because of a natural thing, a natural phenomena that has occurred to you. Sexual orientation, just like a person is a heterosexual person, he has no choice in this. We have black hair, somebody has white hair. So a person's orientation has got nothing to do with it. Are we trying to penalize it? No.
This court is not trying to do that.
Yes, this court is not. And this is what we have come to ask the Honorable Court. As per your question, the Navtej Singh Johar satisfies this. You said that Article 21 is in conflict with Article 25. The right to religion was in conflict. There are, I unfortunately do not have the list of the precedents available here, but I would like to put forth this with much seriousness that many a times has this court said that when the Article 21 is in conflict with some other article, Article 21 will obviously have more weightage. The right
Article 21, right to life, for example, absolutely it has more weightage. Absolutely, there's no doubt about that. But this court absolutely does not consider one article to be, part 3 goes hand in hand with every other article that is available under the part 3, right? Now, what you need to understand here is that Article 21, right to life in itself imbibes a plethora of other substantive constitutional civil rights, including liberties as well. Now, my only question to you is to just pinpoint what I'm asking you. Right to life in itself ensures that there is no choice left for the person to take his own life. I hope I'm making myself clear. There is a question of
right to die. Is that what you're saying?
There is no choice. Choice is not a matter of question there. Choice cannot be exercised. Here, marriage, although as much as this court is inclined to hold for the purpose of a harmonious construction of right to life under Article 21, that it ensures that there is a choice for every individual, every citizen of this country to marry whoever they intend to. Now, there has been certain laws that have been made. Those are called the personal laws, because our entire country in the preamble itself says we are secular. Therefore, all the other personal laws have to go to ensure harmony. Now, the Hindu law unfortunately does not have any provision which says same-sex couple are entitled to perform the same Hindu rites. There is a vacuum. Now, if you intend to ensure that there is a protection of this particular right for these couple, LGBTQIA community, to marry whosoever they intend to, the forum is elsewhere. Now, the infringement of right to life is not being found That is exactly what this court asks for the purpose of establishment of entertainment or the allowing of this particular petition.
Okay. May I answer to this?
Please go ahead.
My answer will be two-pronged. Okay. One will have a constitutional backing and other will have a logical backing. If we read a plain reading of Article 13 of the Constitution, which gives the citizens the fundamental right of religion, in subsection 2, it says, not this Article 25. I'm really sorry, my lord. Article 25. I'm really sorry. The Article 25 was categorically says, Article 25 Clause 2, nothing in this article shall affect the operation of any existing law or prevent the state from making any law providing for social welfare and reform.
Very well.
Okay. This means that I understand the personal laws are they stand uninterfered and their ancient texts are supreme. I agree with that. But the Constitution has itself said that nothing shall prevent the state from legislating for social welfare. We will clearly establish that it is for the social welfare. I had arguments for that and reform. I will also establish before this court that. Okay.
Please go ahead.
Yes. Now you said that why should we intermingle with the personal laws? I would like to say, Your Lordship, the original Hindu acts, the original, if we see in the ancient Hindu acts, adoption of a son was only allowed. Now we can clearly see that daughter's female child can also be adopted. Ancient Hindu text expressly bars a remarriage because a remarriage would mean that the first marriage gets over, and the ancient Hindu law says that it is a sacrament for at least 7 years and not 7 years for eternity. So there is no question of a remarriage. But see, we understand all the religious harmony behind it. But from time to time, there are the Caste Disabilities Removal Act. There were so many acts that have been passed. There are so many deviances from the ancient Hindu texts that were done to give force to 21 to B, that is for social reform. So we are just asking the court to do one more addition. When so many have already taken place, heavens won't fall if one another, just one more is added.
Council, our very apprehension is the heavens are going to fall.
The heavens are going to fall. Okay, so
more so in the light of the fact that we are now being ruled by a Hindutva motivated political party. I mean, the state will be given an opportunity to counter my arguments, but yeah, this is what we need to ensure, that there are no heavens falling down. And moreover, attention once again. Okay, please refer to Article 25. Article 25(2), right? Nothing in this article shall affect the operation of any existing law, right? We're talking about no new law, but the existing law, and prevent the state from making any law that is a future law. A, regulating or restricting any economic, financial, political, or other secular activity which may be associated with religious practice. So my hands are tied, Council. As much as I'm very impressed with the arguments that you're making before this court, which are very progressive in nature and probably really resonates with the age that I'm in. Probably I'll not be understanding this if I'm a 60-year-old individual just about to retire. Okay. But yes, surely as much as I understand and be attracted to your propositions, I am only functioning within the realm of the law, the constitutional realm of this entire law. Now the Constitution says religious practice, which may be associated with religious practice. The religious practice is exactly what I'm trying to, and you have driven home the point for the state now. The state is going to take it to the, make a huge goal for this. So please, once again, I mean, how much time is remaining, Preeti?
Sir, it's 2.5 minutes.
Very well. I think we'll make the best out of it. So can you please pause the time for me and he can argue for
Your Lordship, my issue number 4 is yet to cover.
Okay, please proceed to your issue number 4. Let's first cover your
issue number 3 is also not completed.
You can continue with what you were saying. I had paused the time before.
No problem. Well, let's actually cover issue number 4, because issue number 3 is pretty much all discussed, in my opinion. Please proceed to issue number 4.
Sir, 2 key submissions for issue number 3 is still to be made. So shall I continue with?
Yeah, please go ahead.
So my lordship, dozens of treaties like Mitakshara, Dayabhag, Yagyavalika Smriti, Smriti Chandrika, Datak, Mimamsa, Vivad Tandav have emerged in the past, all regulating laws related to the marriage, inheritance, and adoption, proves that Hindu society has always welcomed new jurisprudence related to its civil affairs. The homosexual jurisprudence shall be one new jurisprudence. My next key submission is, when so many additions have been made to the ancient law, certainly one much needed a new addition can be made to the existing law. Now coming to issue number 4, which asks whether or not members from the said community can be allowed to be married as per the rituals of their respective religions. Hindus were earlier allowed polygamy, later allowed widow remarriage. That is to a marriage which was earlier legal is now null and void, and what is today perfectly valid marriage was earlier prohibited. The interesting point here.
May I just make a point?
Yes, sir.
The court is well aware of all these laws, and please, the court intends to remind that the Hindu Marriage Act is promulgated in the year 1955. Since then, these issues that you're discussing has never fallen for consideration, either before the Constituent Assembly or before a Supreme Court or before a High Court in any writ. Now, we do understand that there is a change or a departure from the earlier practices and traditions. And your co-counsel has already argued that there is a departure, there's a practice of departure. Let's be progressive in nature. Okay. Now, we do understand in the ritual aspects, this court has no other queries that needs to be examined. Please proceed to issue number 4.
Sir, this is issue number 4 only.
Yeah.
I'll move to the second key submissions. Change is the law of the nature. Society evolves with time. There are historical precedents of change in society brought by reformative law. Spirit of reform must not be penalized. One must not be forced to renounce his religion to marry as per his choice. Third point, when live-in relationship is not considered illegal in India, and consensual homosexual act has been decriminalized, getting a legal sanction for this is the only logical conclusion to it. The Supreme Court cannot choose to remain silent on this matter, which the Supreme Court itself just decriminalized in the case.
My lord, I just want to say one line. Can I?
Please go ahead, counsel.
And that will be the conclusion of all our.
Please go.
She was making a point. My co-counsel was actually making a point. If you just hear the entire argument, it actually makes a point. What she was trying to say is, earlier polygamy was allowed. Now polygamy is not allowed. Earlier widow marriage was not allowed. Now widow marriage is allowed. The point here is, despite the fact that ancient Hindu law prohibited both the conditions, once they were legalized, the solemnization of now Widows Remarriage Act takes as per Hindu traditions and rituals only. What I'm trying to say is, when we make a progression, we do not need to lose our religion. If the court is inclined to allow the homosexuals to get married, they shall not be forced to leave their religion. That is, did I make myself clear?
Please go ahead.
Okay, I said that when we take a deviance from the existing law, we shall not be forced to renounce our religion. If the homosexuals are somehow allowed, if a secular code is, let's say, allowed, if a secular code comes into play, the right of a Hindu homosexual to get married as per Saptapadi and Mangal Sutra shall be allowed, because we have seen the Widow Remarriage Act, it takes place according to the Saptapadi only. So now when the homosexuals will be getting married, our concern is they shall be allowed to do in front of the sacred fire, and they shall not be asked to just sign on a piece of paper, because our clients are devout Hindus and they want to marry in front of their sacred fire god. This is what she was trying to say.
Very well. Anything else, counsel?
Just the prayer remains, I think.
Yeah, I think you prayed.
Yeah.
Let's proceed with the respondents' arguments.
Honorable Judge, I'm Krishna Priya Lahari, counsel for the respondent, and I will be addressing issue 1 and 2, and my co-counsel D. Ramcharan will be addressing issue 3 and 4. May it please the court. I'm Krishna Priya Lahari, counsel for the respondent. The counsel shall advance 2 submissions referred to as issue 1 and issue 2, allotting 6 minutes to each issue, and 1 minute for the statement of facts and 2 minutes for the questions. May it please the court. The counsel seeks permission to proceed with the statement of facts.
Facts need not be stated. Please go to the issues.
Much obliged. May it please the court. The counsel seeks permissions to proceed with arguments on issue 1 and 2.
Please go ahead.
Much obliged. Whether the Hindu Marriage Act 1955 and Special Marriage Act 1954 can be read in a manner which includes LGBTQIA community. Your Lordship, it is humbly submitted that Hindu Marriage Act and Special Marriage Act cannot be read in a manner which includes LGBTQIA community, considering the basic fact that LGBTQ community consists of a plethora of sexual orientations and identifications, not just homosexual identification, but please refer page number 8 to 11 of the memorial. The identifications namely as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgenders, trans man, trans woman, queer, intersex, asexual, aromatic, pansexual, heterosexual, cross-genders, and so on. And recently, in Arun Kumar case, it was held that a marriage between a man and a trans woman was a valid marriage in the Hindu Marriage Act. But Your Lordship, please notice that a marriage, the terms man and a woman still persist. The marriage between a man and a woman, it's still in the same box, and it's not between yes, Your Lordship.
Counsel, we understand the difference in the gender bifurcation, and we also note that the terms LGBTQIA+ do not find specific mention anywhere in the Constitution. So we ask you a simple question. Under the Constitution of India, the word citizen, irrespective of the gender, has been used, right? A neutral gender has been pointed out and repeatedly used in every article. While guaranteeing Part 3, it only says a person. Now, please, satisfy the court in respect of not the personal laws, but let's understand the protection of Part 3 for the LGBTQI community. And please enlighten the court if there has been any differentiation in the word citizen or a person under Part 3 or Part 4 of the Constitution.
Much obliged, Your Lordship. Indeed, there is no difference mentioned. Every citizen is considered equal. But under the Constitution, we are guided by our personal laws. So in our personal laws guide how we behave in the society, our marriage, our guardianships, maintenance, etc. But who prefer not to be ruled by the religion, they are guided by the Special Marriage Act. So in the present case, we are dealing with the Hindu Marriage Act and Special Marriage Act. So.
Counsel, I would like to just make a mention here repeatedly. Please understand the question and answer it specific to that. I hope you do understand and realize the principles of interpretation of statutes in this country, in Republic of Replemento, where the spirit of Constitution should always be kept in the back of your head when you're reading a statute. No statute can travel beyond the realm of the constitutional 4 walls. Therefore, the Hindu Marriage Act and the Special Marriage Act, be there any other personal law, when the word person is used anywhere, why not it be interpreted in the same manner that it has been used in the Constitution, and ensure that irrespective of any sexual orientation or gender, they can also have the liberties and the rights to be protected under those personal laws. What prohibits the state from enforcing them in the manner they are intended to in the constitutional spirit?
On Your Lordship, it is humbly submitted that though in the eyes of the Constitution, all of us are equal, but our basic tenet of our laws is derived from our religion. It goes way back. Keeping in mind the constitutional morality, all of the other base which which raises the issue that civil rights are not granted to the LGBTQ community, which addresses the issue that in the constitutional morality question refers to that civil rights are not granted to the LGBTQ community. And the council submits that referring to the LGBTQ community, the situation in India, it consists of Aravalis, Shiv Shaktis, Kotis, and so on. And they all of them are, and 90% of the transgenders and 90% of the transgenders in India are into prostitution, drug abuse, and also they are unemployed. And keeping in the view of constitutional morality, our state, the Republic of Triplamento, has been making amends to improve the position of transgenders and LGBTQ community. Your Honorable Lordship, can I share a document to show that?
Sure, you're free to do that, but just want to keep it on record that this court will be striking off your argument from the record that attributing the low life of transgenders.
But the reports show that
so we are not here discussing about the drug habits of a particular gender or a sexual oriented person. We are only here to ensure that everybody is given equal right and protection. Yeah, please go ahead and share the document.
Which has already been okay, sir.
No, may I just ask a question? Can you please pause the time? The question that I intend to pose to you is this one. Council, please pay attention that do you deny a voting right to a queer? As a state, I'm asking you, please answer the question. Do you intend to deny the right to vote for a person who claims to be a queer or a cisgender?
No,
Can you answer
sir.
the question?
No, sir.
Do you intend to say that you're going to deny the right to hold their religious faith because they are queers and cisgenders or transsexuals or bisexuals or gay or lesbian? Do you intend to deny them that right? Or do you intend to oppose their right to carry out any free profession or trade?
No, Your Lordship, it is humbly submitted that even trans or all the LGBT community is free to practice their religion. Not just that, LGBTQ marriages are not recognized in the custom, and the basic tenet of the religion says that marriage shall be I'm diverting from the topic.
No, you're actually coming back to the topic, Council. Can you please point out to this court where in a codified law is the marriage between the same sexes prohibited?
Okay, the codified laws are derived from the customs immemorial and from the religious text, as we know that. And Honorable Your Lordship, I would like to submit that we imitate our gods, like what gods have done. So in our customs and we say that Rama has one single wife. So we say that the person should be moral and he should only have one wife. That has been practiced. And from the times immemorial, even in Christianity, they show that Adam and Eve are the first couple which created all of our world population, and which Vishnu and Lakshmi and Shiva and Parvati. And nowhere in our customs we see a homosexual, a man, like a god and a god, or a woman and a woman as a couple, as a source of creation.
Please visit Khajuraho. Please do visit Khajuraho. There is absolutely no basis for the arguments.
Yes, Your Lordship.
This court really understands that polygamy was allowed in the Hindu religious texts, and there is absolutely a prohibition. There is absolutely a crime which says bigamy is prohibited, polygamy is not to be practiced insofar as Hindu law is concerned. I'm asking you a simple answer. I'm asking you a simple question, and I respectfully, invite an answer from you. The prohibition under a codified law that no, you cannot marry. Is there a prohibition?
There is no explicit prohibition under that, which says that homosexual couples cannot marry. But there are prohibitions on certain acts, which state that if there is a sexual intercourse between like a widowed woman and a virgin, it can be punished under Manusmriti, or And generally in our ancient texts, it said that the purpose of marriage is procreation, praja. So the basic purpose of marriage, when in case of homosexual couples, it is not possible. So from the customs, like
I'm sorry, counsel, but I'm just trying to be very subtle here when I'm saying this. Please don't take me otherwise. But a woman who is not fertile cannot procreate, or a man who is not fertile can also not procreate. So in either case, an infertile man marrying an infertile woman will not be also probably entitled to a praja under the Manusmriti. So would that amount to an illegal marriage?
But it does amount to a ground for divorce under Hindu Marriage Act.
It's a choice, counsel. Now we are talking about choice.
Yes, much obliged, Your Honor, indeed. But I'm sorry, counsel, I'm just having like one of the blocks. But in our religion, say in all of the religions, in Islam and Christianity, it is the arbiter by the death penalty. In the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, though our Hindu law is very much tolerant the homosexual relationships, we have a little of that woman like breaches the virginity of a girl, then they are penalized, but there are no certain explicit punishments for homosexuality. But Your Lordship, please also consider
which law are you referring to? Which section are you referring to for the punishment?
I'm referring to Manus, Lordship.
This court is not bound by it, unfortunately. This has been codified. Manusmriti has been taken as a basis and a genesis, obviously as a genesis for Hindu law. And many practices that has been mentioned under Manusmriti have also been rendered to be unconstitutional by this court in many occasions. Now, we are not going to pass any order, or there has been nothing prayed by the state. And the simple aspect is whether there is a prohibition, express prohibition that can be demonstrated before this court, and what entails an order from this court, if at all this we are inclined to pass an order in favor of the petitioners, what entails to it that will be not constitutional.
Your Lordship, when delivering the NAS Foundation case, when we mean unions, we don't literally means marriage, but we mean unions like which is not recognized as a marriage, which shows the intent of the judiciary of not to recognize homosexual relationships as a part of personal laws, and not outside, not like a separate act, but under the personal laws, because it interferes with the religious liberty of the majority. It's not that minorities rights are rejected, but minorities rights are rejected, but it interferes with the exercise of religious liberty of all the religions. And
counsel, do you want to have a glass of water? Please do.
Yes, yes.
So while you drink, just pay attention to the question. Can you just explain what are the rights of a child begotten in a live-in relationship? Whether he's entitled for succession?
No, Your Honor. For the succession and maintenance and adoption, a relationship has, but a single one can adopt a child, but for the succession from the father's side, though it has to pass from the karta of the family, the marriage has to be recognized.
No, counsel. I'm talking about a man and a woman having a live-in relationship, which has been, please do mind that it has been legalized, or rather, I would say, recognized. Now, a child begotten by a couple, okay, they have been identified as a couple by this court in the previous judgment. Now, when they are living together, and because of their union, there is a child, would that child not be entitled to succeed the properties from the male in the relationship? Which law provides for that?
Probably Hindu adoption.
Does
and
Hindu Succession Act recognize live-in, the word live-in?
No.
Then where do we find the rights protected? How did we protect? This court does has the absolute authority to travel beyond and exercise extraordinary.
Yes, your lordship. But may I quote that now in the present day society, live-in relations are a little bit accepted because from the last 2 decades, Indian society has been a little more tolerant to the new advancements which has been taken place in the society, say women's rights or women's employment, or say live-in relationships or intercaste marriages. But your lordship, please note that though India is majorly consists of rural populations, and even now today we notice that honor killings where the couples have been killed for the family's honor, and by granting by allowing homosexual couples to marry according to the religious rites, it might actually do them more harm than good. They might be boycotted from the society, or they might be like targeted for certain groups. For that, again, explicitly a police protection must be provided to them.
Well, you are the state. You are duty bound to ensure the protection of the rights of the citizens. That we will not even go. I mean, we will not belittle the government in actually, teaching you what you need to do to protect the, citizens. All that we intend to understand from the court is, if this is absolutely going to be a disastrous judgment, tomorrow somebody is going to come up and say that you have breached this provision of law, or you have gone beyond this spirit of the constitutional realm. Unless and until you establish that, this court probably is inclined to, grant the reliefs that have been sought for.
Honorable Judge, may I refer to a judgment?
Please do. Please do.
In Padma Sundar Rao versus State of Tamil Nadu, addressed the question that a marriage may be solemnized between two brides or two bridegrooms under the Hindu Marriage Act. It was held that such interpretation is not possible because every act must be read as in whole in context. And in Bombay High Court versus State of Narsappa Mali held that personal laws cannot be tested against the touchstone of fundamental rights, and the court may not interfere with the fundamental rights of the citizens. It is also enshrined in Article 29 of the Constitution, and also Article 13 states that if any statute which breaches the fundamental rights of the citizens, it must be struck down. Your Honorable Lordship, may I quote that by not allowing homosexual couples marry according to their religion, the state is acting in order of Article 13, which say because by protecting the fundamental rights of the citizens. Because if it does breach the religious liberty of the Hindus, or say Muslims, or say Christians, eventually it would be struck down anyway.
Okay.
And in the major judgment which was referred in Navtej Singh Johar versus Union of India, and also judgment Lawrence versus Rexis, the court, when delivering the message, quoted that it does not have. May I just read it out? So I don't actually remember it.
Please do. Are you referring to Lawrence versus Texas or the Navjot Singh Johar?
Lawrence versus Texas, which was also applied in Navtej Singh Johar, Union of India. Yes. The judge quoted that they granted the rights because the present case does not involve minors, it does not involve persons who might be insured, coerced, or who are situated in relationships where consent might not be easily refused, or it does not involve public conduct or prostitution, and it does not involve whether the government must give formal recognition to any religion of the homosexual person seek to enter. Honorable Your Lordship, please acknowledge that all of the factors are at stake. The council shall refer to a judgment in Fazal Rao versus State of Bihar.
Council, before you proceed, the the state of Texas judgment is redundant because the same-sex marriage has already been legalized in the state of Texas in America.
Yes,
So it does not hold anymore.
But also in America and in UK, according to Article 9 of the European Convention, religious institutions, they cannot be forced to recognize homosexual relationships. They can recognize if they want to, but they cannot be forced to.
This country is not being run by a religious institution, and we beg to differ with you.
It's the same in the USA also, sir.
No. In USA, out of the majority states have already legalized the same-sex marriage through a proper statute, through a proper law or a regulation.
If the courts if they don't want to if the religious institutions or the churches, or if they don't want to recognize it, they cannot.
Why can't you, if you don't want to get into the touchy aspect of a religion, then why can't you just ensure that there is a special protection for these people under Special Marriage Act? What's stopping you from making sure that that the rights of the persons are protected? At least they can have a common union in the eye of law, be able to, father children or mother children by adoption.
Your Lordship, it is humbly submitted that the LGBTQ community is ever evolving, and interpreting the reading out this amending or reading out the Special Marriage Act, including the LGBTQ community, would require a little more time, because society is still evolving, and there might be new generations or identifications emerging in the future and they would be eventually
that cannot be a ground counsel. The ever evolving see, as a judge, I don't even understand half of the orientations that has been mentioned in the abbreviation of LGBTQI, but that does not mean I will deny them the basic rights under the Constitution. So I'm just looking for an answer from the state.
Your Lordship, it is humbly submitted that though the state is only contending that the LGBTQ community cannot be married or cannot recognize their marriage under Hindu Marriage Act or under the personal laws, but the state is striving. To keep up the LGBTQ welfare in the state of Maharashtra, in the state of Kerala, in the state of Odisha, because special drives and Transgender Amendment Bill 2016, which recognizes the third gender. And also further, they are providing welfare schemes, subsidiaries, government jobs, and education for the transgender children, so that they won't be disfound, and take them out from the community, and so that they will be well educated. So we can conclude that the state is building a foundation for the LGBTQ community to grant them civil rights, but it's just not there yet, because as we can say, Indian society is quite conservative, and it's still evolving, and it's not as progressive as USA or UK or Canada. And it, though when the time permits, maybe 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whenever it takes, my civil rights and civil rights might be granted to them. And also, I would like to revert back to you that under Constitution, everybody is equal. Keeping up the constitutional morality, the state is doing their job by granting them jobs, right to livelihood, and their keeping up their children, like transgender children, and in Kerala, the first metro driver was a LGBTQ woman. So,
Council, you're not doing a favor to the LGBTQ community by enhancing or highlighting these examples. So basically, the state's argument is adjourn this matter by another 3 years, so some other genders will be added into LGBTQ. Then we can deal with this issue. We are not inclined to adjourn the matter. We want to take a decision right away. Let there be any additions in the future. We'll consider them as they come. Any arguments on this issue?
Then, Your Honor, please consider the facts that in the in the Navtesh Singh Johar versus Union of India and the Nas Foundation case, the homosexuality was decriminalized on the ground that because the homosexuality is not recognized, the AIDS patients are going underground and they are not being recognized. The basic principle why the homosexuality was recognized was because they were because of the health concerns of the patients, and also the decriminalization of the sexual acts is just an consequential
the council, I just want to add that, we had, when we were dealing with decriminalization of section 377 of the IPC, we noted, Preeti, we were not, we deliberately, if you have read the entire text of the judgment, we have deliberately left open the aspects of adoption, succession, and all the other aspects, and left it open, dealing with the criminalization and the decriminalization aspect. We were not talking about this thing. So now the question is arisen. Now, okay, be that as it may, any arguments on this issue, second issue?
For two cases, in Fazal Rab versus Union of UP and Bellinger versus Kenya, cases were noted where the person who's a homosexual, identified as homosexual, has coerced minors into consensual sexual acts, and eventually he was given a less term because it was consensual. But your lordship, the question is to consider is raping a boy, what does it amount to? Although
the current subject does not have any relevance to that case law. Moving forward, any other submissions on issue number 2?
I'm done, sir.
All right. The next counsel, co-counsel, Mr. Ram Sharan on the race car chair.
Am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible. Please go ahead.
May it please the court.
Yeah.
The counsel argues that appellant has conveniently concealed and didn't address the following issues.
Please don't swing your chair.
Sorry.
Yeah, let's have some decorum. Yeah.
The religion offers believers a well-defined moral framework. Undermining the establishment would destroy the tenet of religious liberty. And we have freedom of religion in this country. Houses of worship can always decide for themselves which rituals they will perform and practice. Moving on to further issue 3, the issue is whether or not customs, traditions, rites, rituals form an exhaustive code as contested by the Republic of Riplamento. Your Lordship, the Council advances the argument that customs, traditions, rites, rituals form an exhaustive code as they are a recognized source of law, and it was held in Gokul Chand versus Parveen Kumari. It was stated explicitly that customs are a very authentic and binding source of law because of the historic value that they have, and customs are derived from religion.
What is the basis of your argument, counsel? Which custom is being violated here?
Same-sex marriage.
Same-sex marriage is prohibited under which codified law? The same question goes to you.
It was prohibited in ancient texts.
No, this court is not bound, may I remind once again, by the ancient text. We are concerned about the codified law under the Constitution. Are you a provision of, because the rights, the Hindu rights, for example, I'm only considering this as an example to the Hindu religion, people, or a homosexual or a queer or a cisgender or a transgender who is born into Hindu religion intends to marry his partner under Hindu rights. Now, my question to you is this: is there an express prohibition under any codified law? Text, Lord Arjuna also was compelled to act as a transgender, right? There has always been a respect, and there has been never been any criminalization to being a transgender or a cisgender or a queer or whatever. Our ancient texts are very clear, and I am an avid reader of this thing. But please do not refer to the ancient text. Please refer to the current statistics or the current situations which are going to come into your way to codify.
Your Lordship, my co-counsel would address to this issue.
Please go ahead, co-counsel.
Your Lordship, in X versus Z Hospital, it was held that heterosexual penetration is a corporeal law linking marriage with law, and the consummation of a marriage is the thing which links which links marriage with law. And it can be deduced that the primary objective of the marriage is procreation, and the consummation of the marriage, the marriage, one of the criteria of solemnization of the marriage is also heterosexual consummation.
Counsel, I would like to refer, although trying to depart a little from the current subject, then the Nirbhaya case modified to include the definition of rape, right? A wide ambit, a wide array of heinous crime was heinous nature of I'm forgetting the word, vaginal insertions were done, not with a penis. That was the only definition. But this court has traveled beyond it, because that was the need of the hour. Now there is a need of the hour. We are not talking about decriminalization again. This court calls upon the state to have some respect to the decriminalization of sexual intercourse, not refer to any sort of judgments which reflect or refer to that aspect. We are talking about the aspect of marriage and consummation. The counsels can enlighten this court as to what are the essentials of a marriage under the Hindu Marriage Act? Essentials.
A sanity and both of the parties must be majors, and they should not have a living spouse, and
Saptapadi is not one of the essentials.
And
cannot be allowed to marry as per the rituals of the respective religion, because none of the religions observe or recognize the same-sex marriages. Allowing such communities to marry according to the religion would amount to breach of right to religious liberty. It is humbly submitted to your lordship that around the world, a religious or a philosophical belief that a marriage should be only between a man and woman is protected under Article 9 of European Convention on Human Rights. Therefore, forceful recognition of same-sex marriages under personal laws may be taken as an unwanted interference with one's religion. In Schack and Co. versus Austria, it was clarified that European Convention on Human Rights does not oblige member states to legally recognize or legislate the same-sex marriages.
Whether these dictas are, this court is well aware of all these dictas, they can never be considered as ratios. But for the purpose of an effective and a healthy argument, we understand that, you know, we are not denying that religious freedom has to be upheld or not. But that's not the moot question here. We also intend to uphold the religious freedom of the petitioners who are before this court. So what kind of a breach to the Part 3 occur? Or rather, is there a beneficial legislation under Part 4 that you intend to bring upon this court, this country? Any further arguments, counsel, on issue 4?
Your Lordship, I would like to answer the question.
Yeah.
That the LGBTQ community may be allowed to form their own laws, as the Brahmo Samaj once contested, and they might be able to form their own customs, and they might be enacted in new act only for them, so that when the upcoming sexual orientations or identifications take place, they might be accommodated into such law.
So you're basically ousting them from the religion?
No, Your Lordship, it is humbly submitted that we never mentioned that they couldn't practice
You're
their
saying
religion.
that they
They
can
just could
go ahead and
marry according to their religion because
yeah.
The religion doesn't recognize the marriage.
Okay. Any further arguments, Counsel? If no further arguments, this court reserves its judgment. We can move further.
Yes, my lord.
Sir, thank you for your great company, and I hope the participant has learned so much from you. But I would like to ask you for the feedback.
I hope so too, that they have learned something from me. I really wonder. This is a subject which I cannot really, wait to argue in a court of law by myself or the petitioners. So, by the way, before I proceed, what is the prayer that the respondents are asking from me, and why would the respondents ask any prayer from this court? All right. Okay. So first feedback, I'll just stick to that. Respondents, you're not asking any prayer from this court. Okay. Don't ask a prayer from this court. Basically, you're asking, your simple prayer is to dismiss the petition. That's it. Right. Okay. You are not asking any prayers. So you're not a petitioner here. Now, coming to the feedback, starting from the petitioners, right? My first feedback would be, your memorial contains a lot of typographical mistakes. Please ensure that these are not done. I'm just going to be very candid about that. And abbreviations. When you intend to abbreviate, yes, you may abbreviate, but ensure that you're actually giving a definitions part before you go and abbreviate. Okay, these are very important. I've learned it the hard way. So now I have a chance to give back to my legacy, right? So any reference to a particular provision of law in your pleadings, right? The memorials is what you call it for the purpose of this moot court competition. But when you're actually in the real life, live scenarios, you will be calling them petitions or affidavits or, memos or whatever you call it. Never refer to a section without referring to the statute. There has been many places where in your entire memorial, you refer to HMA section 5. So that's not going to cut it, because when dictating the order, the judge looks at the, pleadings, and it probably confuses them, and it actually can result in a complete departure from the real order. Now, these are the feedbacks on your memorial aspects of the petitioners. In the respondent's memorial, the conciseness in your memorial is really appreciative. The extraction of the judgments and their moot points are also fine. But there are many judgments that you have extracted in your memorial which are not to your rescue. So when you're actually extracting the relevant portion of a judgment, please read through it thoroughly, whether it is actually coming to your rescue or whether it is going to give a cue for the opposite party to pull it out from. Okay, same goes for the petitioners as well. I mean, your drafting skills are much better than what I had when I was in my law school. So, pat yourselves on the back, doing a great job, guys. I think the law schools teach you well, but much better than what they did to us. Yeah, that's about the memorials aspect. Coming to the arguments, the petitioners, Vedang, right? Vedang, good arguments. The court decorum is missing. Unfortunately, we live in a scenario where the court manners is something that cannot be taught through a lesson. It just needs to be learned through observations. So please do attend a lot of court sessions. The unnecessary formalities, rather I would put it this way, the unwarranted respect need not be given to a bench just because they are a judge. I do understand that. But during the arguments, you have been using words like "theek hai." So cut it out. I think practice will, get this out. It's just I'm just nitpicking at this point, but yeah. So this is one feedback to you. Then your co-counsel Pratiksha, rather than reading out your memorial, Pratiksha, ensure that you're able to formulate them in your head. For that purpose, start practicing before a mirror as to what you intend to and argue with yourself. Okay. This type of practice, you'll only do it for 1 year probably, because after that, it becomes part of your system. It's like eating and drinking water. So, and the points that have been raised by both of you, and the coordination is good. this streamlined method of arguing my issue number 1, issue number 2, issue number 3, issue number 4 is not going to be available in a real life scenario. The judge actually would summarily dismiss your application just because of a technicality. Like the ones that, for example, this application is being argued under Article 139A of the Constitution, although it is a writ of mandamus that was originally filed before a high court. Okay, try to grasp the technical aspects of this also. A lawyer who does not know the technical aspects will always be fooled by their clerks. Okay, you will understand when I'm talking this, when you, this will ring a bell when you actually come to practice. So technicalities are very important. The provision of law in which you're filing is very important, because that determines the relief that you prayed for. N number of cases, the petition contains absolutely amazing pleadings, but the counsel does a very small mistake on not seeking a relief specific to that particular provision of law. In those scenarios, the court's hands are tied and they will not be granting that relief. Only a passing remark might have been done. So to avoid these circumstances, make sure that you're covering each and every aspect in your prayers. Coming to the respondent side, the respondents, you enacted very well as a state counsel. I mean, you have very little to argue. You have absolutely nothing to substantiate in the real life scenario, but still you did a great job. Unfortunately, many of the questions remain unanswered. So I do hope that you have noted down these questions. If you're moving to the next round, you are able to answer these questions. Same goes to the petitioners as well. May I ask which year of law are you in? Which semester?
We are in the penultimate, so we are okay. About to write our 8 some exams.
Fine. Pratiksha and Vedang?
So my co-counsel is in his 2nd year and I'm in my 3rd year of 5 years course.
Yeah, so you do have a lot of time to ensure that the practice of these pleadings and drafting is going to be bettered. But the understanding of the law as it is supposed to be presented, right? When you're arguing, any arguing counsel, you go and speak to any senior counsel, the arguments are delivered in twofold. 1, the factual, 2, the legal. When I'm going to argue the legal aspects, I'm never going to refer to the factual aspects. When I'm going to argue the factual aspects, I'm not going to refer to any legal aspects. The reason is the court, the issue that you dealt with today is a very complex subject. It's a very, very complex subject. Therefore, you have done, you have divided your subject into issues and you dealt with it. But in a real life scenario, these issues might be completely thrown to the wind by the judge. The questions keep riling at you and you have to keep answering the questions rather than presenting your case. You have to be prepared for that. The next moot court, also prepare for an alternative where the judge shows absolutely no interest in your memorial. So be prepared for an extempore argument with the judge within the court decorum, right? For that, you need to be well prepared. Preparation is the key here. So that's about it. That is my observation. Let's not delve into the subject matter of the dispute because it's a very touchy aspect, right? So well done. Congratulations and amazing job, Mr. Manav. I don't know if he's here. He's joined?
No, sir, he's not here. Thomas sir is here.
Yeah. Thomas sir is there?
Yeah, I can see him, but like...
That's all right.
Thomas sir is here.
How are you, sir? It's wonderful to see you. Sir, we can't hear you. Sir, your audio is not coming through. No, sir.
Now, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, wonderful.
Yeah. Now, I was here. I just just stepped into your room. I could hear you motivating them, and you have been very practically guiding them that the offshoots will be there. The rest of that's a very, very, very vital point you people should know. And it's a and you are motivating them, guiding them. Very good, very good.
It's so nice to see you, sir. I hope you're all staying safe and healthy.
Yeah, we are all. We are all. I hope all of you also follow the protocol. Keep safe, because government, I think, is helpless. Be it any government in this position, they will be helpless only. So we have to take care of ourselves. I mean, by keeping ourselves distanced and safe with masks and everything.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Wish you good luck. All the best to all of you. Thank
All
you,
the
Mrs. Shravan.
No, sir.
Thank you.
I find it privileged, sir. Thank you so much for having me. And all the best to all the participants. Great job, guys.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah, Manav is joining. Manav is joining.
Sure, I'll be there. Thank you, Preeti, as well. Hi, Manav.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, sir. Thank you so much.
No, you're welcome. And I'm very glad to be part of this wonderful session and a brilliant topic.
Oh, thank you. I hope you enjoyed the rounds also.
No, absolutely. I mean, what pleasure does a lawyer have to be sitting in a judge's position and grilling his opponents, right?
We don't get to do this regularly, so yeah, it's good.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thanks a lot for having me. And
Shravan is my senior from college.
Okay,
super senior.
Yes.
Not just senior.
Right, sir.
Good. Right, sir. Thank you.
All the best.
Yes, sir. All the best to every participant, right? Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I'll be online. The participants may go. Actually, Preeti, I wanted to just say that I haven't graded. I need to still grade the sheet. I'll be sending it out, updating the sheet.
Sure.
Okay?
Sure.
Thank Bye.
Sure.
So, sir, the participant should leave, right?
Yeah, the participants may leave.
Participant, you can leave.
Bye, Vedang. Bye, Pratiksha.
Add a request.
All the best, guys.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Vedang, please tell me.
I understand the mood is still going on. The submissions will be done tomorrow, provided say that, sir, but I want to learn.
Yeah, it's absolutely, everybody wants. I want to learn too.
One thing about the court manner, I want to learn from you, and I want to learn many things from you. Where to contact you, sir?
Preeti, I'll just take a minute, right? Okay. Vedang, see the court manners. We are actually.
Sir, you took us by the blow.
No. Actually, we are progressing. Now, I'll tell you what. When I came into practice 12 years ago, and when I went to the High Court, I was standing in a corner with my hands folded like this in a corner. It's the entire courtroom is, it's crowded. And I was just standing in a corner, just folding my hands like this. And I was pointed out by a senior counsel that you shouldn't fold your hands, stand straight. So I wondered why. Okay. And another example is I was sitting on the front row and I was just crossing my legs and reading my file. Another senior counsel tells me you shouldn't cross your legs because you're directly facing the judge. So these are something that I'm absolutely uncomfortable. Okay. And my respect is not to the individual who's sitting there, but to the bench. So the more you respect, for example, I'll tell you just a very, very funny example is there are inanimate objects that we love. Don't you love something which is inanimate? You love your phone, you love your car, you love your bike, right? So why do you do that? I mean, that's something which is unexplainable and it's something human about it, right? The respect to the bench will bring the best in you. The respect to the bench is what is important. You might actually disagree completely with the judge as an individual, but respect to the bench. The decorum will automatically follow, right? You respect your father and you love your mother. Okay, there is a saying, in Indian, this thing, you always respect your father and you love your mother. With mother, you will be like holding her, a hand and, walking like a friend. But when it comes to your father, your entire body etiquettes change. Some examples, okay. My child, she's not at all like that. She's absolutely, a crazy kid around me rather than her mother. So it depends. But all that I'm trying to drive here is the respect to the bench is absolutely important, and your decorum will automatically follow suit. You guys are actually having the privilege to participate in these moot court competitions, which are actually giving you an edge over the other, people who are not doing this exercise. So virtual meetings are more, I would say, making it more informal, I would say. right? I've been judging a lot of moot courts in arbitrations and mediations as well, mediation competitions and arbitration competitions. There, we don't really mind. See, arbitrator is just another guy who's taking a fees under the code and delivering his judgment. And, maybe he's a retired judge. That's a different aspect altogether. But still, he is no more a judge. I need not give him the same sort of a decorum that I give in a court. But moot court competitions for regular courts, you need to ensure that you're actually carrying yourself. These virtual is good. I really encourage and promote this among my generation, even in my court practice. But it's making it more informal. When you actually participate, I'm sure you did participate in the previous years, the regular moot court competitions where you physically go, stand at a podium, conduct yourselves by wearing a suit and a tie, and then make your arguments and points. That actually brings a more formality to the entire procedure. Okay. But this virtual is bringing it a notch down, but still, it doesn't matter. Now, you saw Mr. Ramcharan. Ramcharan is gone, right? He was swinging his chair. So that's disturbing to me. Not because I'm a judge, but rather I would say that it's disturbing to the entire proceedings. It's unbecoming. The decorum is not being maintained, is what I would say. Then when one counsel is arguing, you would seldom see even a designated senior counsels like, Nariman or, even Jethmalani leaning back in their chairs and then just swinging. No, that never happens. And immediately a question is posed, they never answer sitting down. I've seen Soli Sorabji, a man who cannot walk with a stick for the past 5 years, who recently passed away in 2021. Soli makes it a point to get up from his chair, make all the effort, holding his cane, taking support from his junior, standing up and answering the question. So this is actually something I would say, respect to the bench, which they are setting an example to the coming generations. Now, we have seen that when I was interning, when I was in my college, or the Supreme Court practice, as front row, there is a woman, there's a junior counsel briefing the senior counsel, and she was just whispering in the ears. Justice Chalameshwar was on the bench. I very categorically remember this. Justice Chalameshwar was on the bench, and Justice Chalameshwar was hearing an argument by another counsel here. And then this briefing in the courtroom, it was so disturbing. Actually, everybody was looking at them. He just uses his pencil on the pad and, taps it and says, "Can you please stop briefing, or you please get out of my courtroom to do that?" The senior got up to walk out. The junior who was briefing stands up and says, the counsel does not like the way she was addressed in the court. Okay. So it does not really give you good marks. You see, there is a thin line, right? You cross your legs and sit and read your file. It doesn't matter, right? You are standing in one corner of the courtroom and then folding your hands. Absolutely. It's your body language. It's something to that. But when you're called upon, you immediately react and answer the court. That's all what you're entitled to do, or you're expected to do, in fact. So this type of reactions to, so inculcate some sort of a formality, inculcate some sort of a respect to the bench. I always say bench, not to individual, not to the judge. So when you start respecting the bench, automatically by the next, when you pass out, when you start practicing, when you're standing before a lawyer, you will understand, okay, I'm supposed to conduct myself. So Mr. Thomas, right, he is a senior counsel having almost 35 years of practice. So when I'm sitting in the courtroom and he walks by, there is no chair. We generally get up and give the chair to the senior counsels. That's a matter of respect. So this is a lineage that we intend to ensure that it is protected in the legal industry, our entire practitioners. Because if we don't start respecting each other in the seniorities, right, respect to the law starts decreasing. Okay, so these are necessary evils, I would say. And I'm sure, a lot to learn. I'm learning, everybody learns on the go. And, the evolution of law in this country is much more rapid than any other country, I would say. We are 50 years behind. If you start reading some really good books, right, Lawrence Tribe, all those, you will understand, for example, you take the Indian Contract Act by Mullah. The examples that are enshrined in Mullah Contract Act are the examples on the Queen's Bench and the King's Bench. which are almost 100, 150 years old, are still applicable to any case that you probably take up and start dealing with, even in this generation. And for that, you don't find a, corresponding provision of law. So we are evolving, but we have been completely set back for almost, I would say, 50 years behind the, jurisprudence of the European as well as the American. But we are reaching there. Very progressive judges are being appointed. Mr. Chandrachud, Mr. Nariman. Okay, so better judges are also there. Mr. Kurian Joseph, right? He was the, he inaugurated the session today. Such a gentleman he is. So Madan B. Lokur, all of these people are very progressive in their approach. These are what is important. And all of you should also concentrate on one day being there on the bench and ensuring that, we progress. Okay. All the best for your future. I hope I was helpful. And that's all that I have. I'm empty. My tank's empty today.
Will you reject this one too? I'm there to get in touch with you, sir. I really want to learn from you.
Absolutely. Please, I'm available. You can search me on LinkedIn. It's Shravan Unnam. It's pretty simple. Shravan Unnam. You can search me and add me there. Right?
Sir, I just wanted to ask which books to read and how to spend my law school days. I've actually that's all I wanted to learn from you.
Spend as much time in the classroom, equal amount you spend it in the canteen. Okay.
Okay.
That's how you learn a lot. That's how you learn people. You study people, right? You have an opportunity, go for an LLM outside the country. Okay. If you have the resources, everybody is, this thing, right? So check out good law schools. If you have the opportunity and the financial resources, do make it a point, apply for scholarships, go for waivers, and then go for a LLM abroad. That really changes the perspective. Okay. Thanks a lot for having me. My tank's empty.
So much,
let's call it a day then. Okay. Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir.
Productive.
Thank you, Preeti.
Sir, you can send the grade sheet to Manav sir email ID.
Immediately. I'll be doing that in the next 5 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, sir. Anjali?